On August 15th of 2015, a 20-year-old South Carolina man with severe burn scars to his face and body turned himself into law enforcement for several outstanding warrants. Zaquan Shaquez Jamison was wanted in connection with the shooting death of a teenager named Athir Murady D'Angelo Crawford, who was killed at his Santee home in January. Authorities are accusing Jamison of firing 27 rounds through the window of the residence, where 10 people were present. In addition to the gunshot victim, according to court documents, he and a second, unnamed suspect were seen laughing and running away from the scene following his surrender to police. Jamison was charged with murder, 10 counts of attempted murder, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. During an initial court hearing, he maintained that he couldn't have killed Crawford because his hands are too damaged from his burn injuries to operate a gun. The accused killer said he received the disfiguring burns in a car accident in 2023 and threatened to file a lawsuit arguing that his arrest overlooked his physical limitations. But prosecutors remain seemingly undeterred, and Jamison is currently awaiting his next hearing from behind bars at the Orangeburg County Jail. Number 23. Stein-Erik Soelberg. A disturbed Connecticut man's friendship with an AI chatbot reportedly fueled the paranoia that ultimately led him to kill his own mother. 56-year-old former Yahoo marketing executive Stein-Erik Soelberg even had a nickname for the chatbot, Bobby, which he referred to as his best friend. Over a 3-month period starting earlier this year, Soelberg documented the developing relationship in a series of YouTube videos. During that time, he became convinced that his 83-year-old mother, Suzanne Eberson Adams, was plotting against him, and that he was a messianic being who was being targeted in a conspiracy, and the AI chatbot reinforced his delusions. When Soelberg said that he believed his mother had poisoned his car's ear vents, the bot reassured him that he wasn't crazy. During another conversation after Adams supposedly freaked out at Soelberg for turning off a computer printer, the bot said that his mother's behavior was aligned with someone protecting a surveillance asset. While conducting a welfare check at the $2.7 million mansion that Adams and Soelberg shared in Old Greenwich on August 5th, police found the mother and son dead. It's believed to be the first documented killing connected to an AI chatbot, and a look into Soelberg's past offers some insight into his impressionable and ailing mind. Soelberg had moved into Adams's home following an acrimonious divorce in 2018. He reportedly suffered from alcoholism and was arrested several times in recent years following public outbursts and for other strange behavior. During interviews with the Greenwich Time newspaper, neighbors recalled seeing Soelberg wandering the community alone and muttering to himself, and his mother told a friend shortly before her death that her relationship with her son was not good at all. Following the bizarre tragedy, an OpenAI spokesperson told the Wall Street Journal that the company plans to introduce new features designed to help people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. Number 22. Shuvonne Vinson. A Michigan family was unwinding after dinner on New Year's Day when 3 armed intruders barged into their Washtenaw County, Michigan residence with guns drawn. 53-year-old homeowner Jeffrey Bernard recognized one of the individuals as Shuvonne Vinson, the biological mother of his foster daughter. In the weeks prior to the intrusion, Vinson had allegedly threatened to kidnap her daughter and harm Jeffrey and his wife, 48-year-old Jennifer Lynn Bernhard. She accused the couple of abusing her daughter and not allowing her to believe in God, even though they were a church-going family, and was angry that the girl referred to Jeffrey and Jennifer as mommy and daddy. Vinson ordered Jeffrey, Jennifer, and Jennifer's father, 74-year-old Stevie Ray Smith, into the kitchen at gunpoint while barking orders at her accomplices, who were later identified as 37-year-old Gregory Callan and 60-year-old Keith Finley. Attempts to de-escalate the situation proved futile, and things took a violent turn when one of the suspects shot Jeffrey in the chest and head, causing him to lose consciousness. By the time he awoke 15 minutes later, Jennifer and her father had been shot dead, and the intruders had fled with Vinson's daughter. Despite the seriousness of his injuries, he mustered the strength to seek help from a neighbor and ultimately survived. Vinson, Callan, and Finley are each facing 12 charges, including 2 counts of open murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count each of assault with the intent to murder, home invasion, conspiracy to commit murder, and more. During her arraignment, Vinson launched into a tirade, shouting that the victims deserved to die and that she wasn't the one who deserved to be in jail. Her inappropriate courtroom behavior continued at a preliminary hearing in early August, as cameras captured footage of her rolling her eyes, shaking her head disapprovingly, and reacting incredulously to Jeffrey Bernard's testimony about the events of that night. All 3 suspects have been bound over for trial and remain in custody at the Washtenaw County Jail as they await their upcoming pre-trial hearings. Number 21. Nicholas Hamlett. While responding to a reported bear attack in October of 2024, sheriff's deputies in Monroe County, Tennessee found the body of a man with a Montana ID bearing the name Brandon Christopher Andrade. It was the same name given by the 911 caller who claimed he had fallen off a cliff while running from a bear in Cherokee National Forest. But the deceased man's blunt force head injuries were inconsistent with a fall, and his name was not Brandon Andrade. Police identified the victim as 34-year-old Stephen Douglas Lloyd, a member of Knoxville's homeless community who struggled with mental illness, but was known for being respectful and friendly. Investigators spoke with a man who identified himself as Andrade's brother, but was later identified as 45-year-old Nicholas Wayne Hamlett, a career conman who was wanted in Alabama for violating parole. He has a lengthy list of previous charges, including attempted murder, kidnapping, menacing, and forgery. In the months leading up to the bizarre killing, Hamlett had taken out life insurance policies totaling more than $8 million for the Brandon Andrade identity, which is just one of several aliases he's used in recent years. He went on the run after his apparent plan to fake his own death failed, and was arrested 3 weeks later in Columbia, South Carolina, after being found unconscious along a roadside and claiming he had amnesia. Prosecutors believe that Hamlett befriended Lloyd with plans to steal his identity and cash in on the fraudulent life insurance policies. After gaining the victim's trust, he allegedly lured Lloyd into the remote area and bludgeoned him to death. Hamlett was extradited to Tennessee following his arrest and is currently being held at the Monroe County Jail on a first-degree murder charge. His wife, Taylor Fibber, was charged with accessory after the fact for lying to the police and aiding in his flight from law enforcement. She posted a $30,000 bond and was released on an ankle monitor pending the outcome of her case. Number 20. Athir Murady. Harris County, Texas Sheriff's Corporal Mahir Husseini was driving to work on a September afternoon in 2024 when a crazed gunman approached his vehicle at a red light and opened fire on him in broad daylight. Later identified as 40-year-old Athir Murady, the shooter initially ran away but returned and shot Husseini several more times before fleeing the scene, firing a total of at least 13 gunshots. Later that day, police tracked Murady to a hotel in Galveston. He fled in his vehicle after realizing that law enforcement was encroaching on him, sparking a brief pursuit that ended when he drove his car into the waters of the Galveston Bay. Since his arrest, Murady has been detained at the Harris County Jail as he awaits trial on a murder charge. During an interview with news outlet KPRC2, Murady's brother said that the defendant had a history of mental illness and that his condition had worsened in recent years. He said he had tried to get help from Murady just days before the shooting, after he became paranoid that the government was after him, and that he had stopped taking his medication for schizophrenia. In January of 2025, news outlet KPRC2 discovered a series of bizarre handwritten letters Murady had sent to the judge overseeing his case during his time in county lockup. In one letter, he attempted to fire his public defender, while another letter was so incoherent that reporters struggled to make sense of the words. At the end of it, Murady wrote that he wasn't a spy and hoped for a fair trial. He made similar iterations in a third letter to the judge, which was also fraught with nonsensical wording. According to the most recent available news updates on the case, the accused cop killer has been ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation. Number 19. Brent White. On December 10th of 2021, a well-liked elderly park caretaker was found brutally murdered at his home in Vancouver, British Columbia. 77-year-old Justice Daniel had been bludgeoned in the head and stabbed more than 40 times. 3 months later, authorities charged Daniel's longtime friend, Brent Stephen White, with second-degree murder. The arrest came after investigators found shoes and a knife with Daniel's blood on them inside the suspect's van. White and Daniel had known each other for over a decade, and the circumstances leading up to the deadly altercation remain unclear. During questioning, White claimed he had acted in self-defense after Daniel bit him on the neck like a vampire. and likely consumed his blood. He also accused the victim of throwing a knife at his face and calling him the equivalent of Satan, an allegation that Daniel's other friends have skeptically described as being totally out of character for the kind and outgoing senior citizen. White resisted his attorney's suggestion for a mental health-related defense, instead maintaining the narrative that he feared for his life when he stabbed Daniel. During his trial earlier this year, his lawyer argued that prosecutors had failed to prove that White acted with the intent to kill the victim, citing the defendant's lack of a discernible motive for the crime or any reason to murder his friend. The judge rejected White's self-defense claim and found him guilty as charged. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Number 18. Joshua Kaplan. A confrontation between neighbors in Pleasanton, California, escalated into gunfire in July of 2025 when a well-known dog trainer named Joshua Kaplan allegedly shot his 71-year-old neighbor 9 times because he believed the victim was abusing his dog. The 50-year-old suspect confronted the senior citizen at his home after receiving a video of the alleged abuse from a client. Kaplan told the victim that he had called animal control and tried to stop the man from leaving by blocking the driveway with his truck, at which point the victim's car lurched forward and struck his vehicle. According to police, Kaplan then opened fire on the victim from inside his truck, shooting the man in the face. Following the shooting, the elderly man was rushed to an emergency room and survived after receiving treatment for life-threatening injuries. In the meantime, his dog was taken to an animal shelter and examined by a veterinarian while Kaplan surrendered to police. The dog was deemed to be in good health and has since been returned to its owner, and Kaplan has since been charged with attempted murder and shooting into an occupied vehicle. He maintains that he acted in self-defense and appears to be free on bond while awaiting an upcoming preliminary hearing. Number 17. Mikeal Cawthon. 33-year-old Rebecca Cawthon was reported missing in Oconee County, South Carolina, in April of 2017 after failing to attend her family's Easter dinner. 16 days later, Rebecca's husband, 42-year-old Mikeal Cawthon, went to the sheriff's office and confessed to killing his wife. Lee explained that he and Rebecca practiced an open marriage and that they had recently introduced a male partner into the relationship for the first time. The three had gone out drinking together on the night of Rebecca's disappearance, which ended with a violent fight between her and Lee. Rebecca went to the hospital claiming she had fallen down some stairs, but in reality, she had been assaulted by her husband. The next day, she went to their home to collect her belongings and to tell Lee she wanted a divorce. During his confession, Lee admitted to being angry at Rebecca for wanting to leave him, but claimed that he had shot her by accident. He shot Rebecca 7 more times, telling police that he didn't want her to suffer, then placed coins over her eyes as part of a Greek mythological death ritual. Lee eventually returned to the scene and placed Rebecca's body into a 55-gallon drum, which he hid in a grease pit under a tractor. He then went to Oklahoma to visit an online friend nicknamed Hamster before returning to South Carolina and turning himself in. In September of 2018, Lee pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He was scheduled to be released in the year 2062 but died in prison in October of 2021, just 3 years into his sentence. Number 16. David Viens. 39-year-old Dawn Viens suddenly vanished in October of 2009, leaving her friends and family mystified as they tried to figure out where she had gone. At the time of her disappearance, she worked as a hostess at a restaurant owned by her husband of 17 years, David, in the Los Angeles suburb of Lomita. David never reported Dawn missing, prompting her sister to file the report at the urging of her concerned friends. He claimed that Dawn had left him due to substance abuse issues and because she wanted him to quit the restaurant business, but her car remained parked outside the Viens home. In the meantime, Dawn's friends received text messages from her phone containing misspellings of her own nickname, leading them to believe someone else was posing as the missing woman. In an attempt to deter suspicions of foul play, investigators found blood spatter inside the Viens home, landing David at the top of the suspect list. In 2011, he confessed to accidentally killing his wife during an argument about money, claiming that he had tied Dawn up to stop her from driving under the influence and woke up to find her dead. Dawn's body was never found, but prosecutors moved forward with a case against David. Following a jury trial in 2013, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. New details came out during a parole hearing in September of 2024, when David admitted to murdering his wife because he believed she had been stealing money from him. After killing Dawn, he spent the next 4 days boiling her body in a large vat of boiling water, then mixed her bones with grease and disposed of them in trash bags. He said he kept Dawn's skull in his mother's attic, but it has never been found. David apologized for murdering Dawn and lying about it, but was denied parole after he failed to convince the board that he was reformed and fit to re-enter society. His next hearing is scheduled for 2027. Number 15. Shaquez Caddle. While working as a political consultant in New Jersey in the spring of 2014, Shaquez Caddle sought a hitman to kill a longtime associate named Mikeal Cawthon. He offered $15,000 to career criminals George Bratsenis and Bomani Africa, who stabbed 52-year-old Cawthon to death at his Jersey City apartment and then set fire to the home. Bratsenis had met Africa in prison while serving time for the 1984 killing of a drug courier. Following their release, the two men robbed banks together. After being charged with several bank robberies in Connecticut, they confessed to murdering Cawthon and implicated Caddle in the crime. Both men cut plea deals with the federal government, resulting in a 16-year sentence for Bratsenis and 20 years for Africa. According to prosecutors, Cawthon had started demanding money and favors from Caddle in exchange for his silence about things he had witnessed while working for him on various political campaigns. Authorities accused Caddle of having Cawthon killed as a way to make the problem go away. In January of 2022, nearly 8 years after Cawthon's death, Caddle pleaded guilty in federal court to one count of conspiracy to commit murder for hire. His admission to the crime came amid his cooperation with the FBI and extensive negotiations with prosecutors who recommended a 15-year prison term due to Caddle's substantial assistance with an ongoing investigation. Caddle's defense attorney requested a 9-year sentence, but Judge John M. Vasquez rejected both recommendations and sentenced the defendant to 24 years while handing down the punishment. Vasquez described the murder for hire plot as one of the most heinous crimes he'd ever encountered during his time on the bench, while admonishing Caddle for showing little remorse and being in denial over his actions. Number 14. The murder of Kayla Sedoskey. In early March of 2023, a group of teenagers discovered a human body wrapped in a tarp while exploring an abandoned juvenile detention facility in Frenchtown, Michigan. The remains were identified as 23-year-old Kayla Sedoskey, who had vanished weeks earlier after going on what she thought was a Valentine's Day date with 21-year-old Bryn Smith. Instead of taking Sedoskey out for dinner and drinks as planned, Smith drove her to the decrepit building where her body was later found. Waiting inside was Sedoskey's ex-boyfriend, 45-year-old Stephen Bales, 34-year-old Kaylin Ramsey, and 24-year-old Sierra Bemis. One of the suspects shot Sedoskey 3 times at point-blank range with a .22 caliber handgun, which was later disposed of by a 5th suspect, Alexander Fecco. Investigators later uncovered evidence to suggest that Stephen Bales had orchestrated Sedoskey's murder as a wedding present to his wife, Narina Bales, who had listened to a police scanner on the night of the homicide in preparation to warn the defendants if law enforcement responded to the scene. During the investigation, Stephen and Narina Bales fled to North Carolina, where they were apprehended by U.S. Marshals following a 7-hour standoff. All 6 suspects were charged in connection with the case, but Stephen Bales was the only defendant who took their case to trial. He was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and sentenced to life without parole. Narina Bales, Bryn Smith, Kaylin Ramsey, and Sierra Bemis pleaded no contest to second-degree murder, resulting in prison sentences of 13.5 years for Bales, 18 to 30 years for Bemis, and 40 to 60 years for Ramsey and Smith. Alexander Fecco pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and accessory after the fact and was sentenced to 5 to 10 years behind bars. Number 13. Kevin Prasad. 31-year-old Kevin Prasad spent months trying to convince a co-worker at San Francisco International Airport to date him, even though the woman was in a long-time relationship with the father of her child. Hoping she'd change her mind, Prasad repeatedly asked her to reconsider and even gave her jewelry, but she continuously rejected him, making it clear that she was not interested. In April of 2018, Prasad learned that the co-worker was leaving her job and moving to Las Vegas with her boyfriend, 31-year-old Mark Mangacat. On the day of her final shift, Prasad and his friend Donovan Rivera followed the victim and Manga Cat to their Daly City home. As Manga Cat parked the car, Prasad approached and shot him multiple times, killing him at the scene. Prasad and Rivera fled the scene and were arrested less than 24 hours later, after Manga Cat's girlfriend raised the possibility of her obsessive admirer's involvement in the crime. Both suspects were charged with murder, assault with a firearm, and firing into an occupied vehicle with a sentencing enhancement for lying in wait. Prasad spent the next 5 years in pre-trial detention and was found guilty on all counts following his trial. In September of 2023, he was sentenced to life without parole, while the case against Rivera appears to be ongoing. Rivera had previously maintained his innocence during a jailhouse interview with ABC7 following his arrest, stating that he had no criminal history, was unaware of Prasad's plan to kill Manga Cat, and that he needed to choose better friends in the future. Number 12. Okisha Range. 34-year-old best friends Okisha Maria Range and Shamiria Mimi Fletcher were once so close that they called themselves sisters, but at some point the dynamics of their friendship changed, resulting in a toxic power imbalance which eventually led to deadly violence. The situation reached its breaking point in March of 2022 when police responded to the women's shared condo in Atlanta and found Fletcher beaten and strangled to death. Range told police that she had kicked Fletcher while play fighting earlier that day, but that Fletcher was conscious and talking afterward. The story failed to adequately explain the circumstances, including how and why Fletcher had been choked, leading to suspicions of foul play. While interviewing people who knew the women, investigators were told that Range had spent years freeloading off Fletcher while not paying rent or even buying her own food. Witnesses described Range as obsessed with Fletcher and extremely controlling, to the point where she manipulated the victim by faking illnesses and tried to isolate Fletcher from her friends and family. Range was charged with murder and aggravated assault, but denied any wrongdoing. She was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole in June of 2025, but reportedly plans to appeal her case while continuing to maintain her innocence from behind bars. Number 11. Amber Paige Laudermilk. In a bizarre case out of Harris County, Texas, that made news headlines in March of 2025, a Houston woman was accused of mutilating the corpse of a convicted predator while working as an embalmer at a funeral home. According to court documents, 34-year-old Amber Paige Laudermilk used a scalpel to castrate the body of 58-year-old Charles Roy Rodriguez, who died from natural causes in January. After being convicted of assault in 2001, Rodriguez was required to register with the state's database, which tracks offenders who are convicted of predatory crimes. But two wrongs don't make a right, according to prosecutors, who charged Laudermilk with abuse of a corpse after learning about the incident from witnesses. Two people reportedly confronted Laudermilk after they saw her stuff the deceased man's genitals into his mouth. The witnesses later told police that Laudermilk warned them and others not to say anything, making them afraid to report the incident. Following her arraignment, Laudermilk was released on a $5,000 bond. Her embalmer's license was suspended by the state and has been placed under review for permanent revocation. Number 10. Sacramento de Jesus Martinez. 33-year-old Marisol Martinez was eating a late-night dinner with her two children in August of 2020 when her estranged husband, 34-year-old Sacramento de Jesus Martinez, showed up at her apartment in New Braunfels, Texas, in violation of a restraining order. He convinced Marisol to get into a car with him, then shot her in the head with a revolver while they drove around the Austin area. Martinez then drove to a drug dealer with the victim's dead body still in the car and bought cocaine. Believing that he had been sold bad drugs, he shot the dealer, who survived. He continued to drive around in search of drugs and opened fire on another group of people before driving to a truck stop where he abandoned his car with Marisol's body inside, determined to flee from the mess he had created. Martinez approached an 18-wheeler in the parking lot and shot the driver, 44-year-old Daniel Seeger, 4 times. He then pushed Seeger's body into the passenger seat and stole the truck, but ditched the vehicle in San Antonio after getting into a rollover crash and was later apprehended at a relative's home. Martinez was found guilty of capital murder in April of 2023, resulting in an automatic life sentence without parole. Number 9. Daniel Hassapis. Australian drug dealer Daniel Hassapis was selling marijuana to his ex and her friend in Wyong, New South Wales in January of 2023 when he began to suspect a man named Sean Froggatt of stealing some items that had gone missing. The women left the room and when they returned 15 minutes later, Froggatt was unresponsive and not breathing. Hassapis had brutally beaten him, inflicting more than 70 injuries to his body. Hoping to revive him after CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation failed, Hassapis told one of the women, Mariana Taitoko, to insert methamphetamine into Froggatt's backside. This also did not work, so they put Froggatt's body in the bathtub where police found it the next day. Hassapis admitted to manslaughter and denied murder, but was nevertheless found guilty of the latter charge. Following his trial earlier this year, he was sentenced to a maximum of 26 years in prison with a non-parole period of 18 years, which will make him eligible for release starting in 2042. The convicted killer's ex, Bonnie Cullen, pleaded guilty to an accessory charge and was paroled after serving 2 years behind bars. Number 8. Aram Montoya. Angered by a man's threat to call social services and get her child taken away, a New Mexico woman named Desiree Lensegrav wanted to hurt Joseph Morgus out of revenge. In 2019, the situation culminated in a violent fight between the man and Lensegrav's boyfriend, Aram Montoya, who stabbed Morgus repeatedly in the neck with a paring knife. Montoya and Lensegrav then buried the victim's decapitated body in a remote part of Taos County before tossing his head and some other items into the Rio Grande River, including the shovel they had used to dig his shallow grave. The case went unsolved for 3 years, before Lensegrav emerged from a medically induced coma and confessed to detectives after being assaulted by Montoya. She explained that Morgus was the relative of a man who had assaulted her as a teenager and that he had called her derogatory names and threatened to share footage of her at a drug house with child welfare workers. Upon being confronted by law enforcement about Lensegrav's confession, Montoya admitted to killing Morgus. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping and was sentenced to life in prison plus 21 years. Lensegrav was found guilty at trial and sentenced to life, but her conviction was overturned in February due to prosecutorial misconduct. She's no longer in custody, with prison records stating that she has completed all her past sentences. Number 7. Alan Williams. Plagued by delusions of his mother planning to harm his younger sister, 21-year-old Alan Williams stabbed 43-year-old Lorraine Cullen dozens of times while spending the night at her house in the English town of Hyatt in May of 2022. He then returned to his own apartment with his sister in tow and called his grandmother, telling her that his mother was now in a better place. Williams' grandfather drove to Cullen's home, where he found her face down in a pool of blood in her living room with 3 knives near her body. The suspect spent the next year in a mental hospital before telling police that he believed Cullen was going to drown his sister or snap her neck. In the months prior to the murder, Williams had displayed increasingly concerning behavior, including hearing voices and believing that his grandmother was trying to kill him. Psychiatrists later determined that he was suffering from untreated paranoid schizophrenia after being misdiagnosed with autism 3 years earlier. In 2024, Williams admitted to manslaughter on the basis of diminished responsibility due to his mental state at the time of the killing. The judge accepted his plea and ordered him to undergo inpatient psychiatric care until he's deemed fit for release. Number 6. Dominque Jackson. The 4th of July holiday took a terrifying turn for staff members and guests at the Renaissance Phoenix Hotel in Arizona in 2023, when 28-year-old Desiree Soelberg was shot dead in one of the hotel rooms. Suspicion quickly fell onto the father of her children, Dominque Jackson, who had gone to the hotel lobby naked and told the security guards that he believed Soelberg was a demon. In the hours leading up to the shooting, Jackson and Soelberg had met a woman from Casa Grande at the hotel's bar. She joined the couple in their room and later claimed that she had woken up at around 3:30 a.m. to find Soelberg dead on the floor with a gunshot wound to the neck. A gun that was found in the room would later test positive for Jackson and the victim's DNA, while both Jackson and the woman who joined the couple tested positive for traces of gunshot residue. Prosecutors charged Jackson with second-degree murder, but backtracked the decision and dropped the case in February of 2025, noting that there wasn't enough evidence to secure a conviction despite the gunshot residue and DNA that were found on the suspect and murder weapon. Unable to prove who pulled the trigger, authorities dismissed the charge, enabling Jackson to walk away a free man. Number 5. Matthew Phelps. On September 1st of 2017, 911 dispatchers in Raleigh, North Carolina, received an unusual emergency call from 28-year-old aspiring pastor Matthew Phelps, who said that he thought he had killed his wife. Phelps claimed that he had woken up covered in blood and with a knife on the bed after taking too much cold medicine and falling asleep in a stupor. Officers arrived at the scene to find 29-year-old Sunday school teacher Lauren Ashley Nicole Hugelmeyer Phelps dead on the couple's bedroom floor. She had been stabbed more than 120 times, and Matthew continued to insist that he had no recollection of the knife attack, telling police that he had taken Coricidin due to ongoing insomnia. Coricidin has no known links to violent behavior, and investigators were highly skeptical that someone could carry out such a brutal attack in their sleep and have no memory of it. Their suspicions increased after learning that Lauren had been planning to leave Matthew due to constant arguing and money problems after tying the knot less than a year earlier. According to Lauren's relatives, Matthew had drained the couple's bank account to fund his video gaming addiction, forcing his wife to take drastic measures to limit his spending. Prosecutors accused him of snapping and killing Lauren in a rage after learning that she was planning to end the marriage. In October of 2018, roughly 13 months after Lauren's death, Matthew pleaded guilty to a first-degree murder charge to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life without parole. He apologized for the crime during his sentencing hearing, calling himself a monster, while largely blaming drugs and alcohol for his actions. Number 4. Devon Tashawn Matthews. Police in Grand Rapids, Michigan were performing surveillance on suspected stalker Devon Tashawn Matthews in June of 2022 when the 27-year-old suspect realized he was being followed and attempted to outrun law enforcement. He ditched the station wagon he was driving and made a run for it, but was quickly captured. Underneath a plastic tablecloth inside the car, officers found the body of a 69-year-old homeless man named Richard Jekyll, who had been shot in the head. Prosecutors accused Matthews of shooting Jekyll as he slept in his car in a church parking lot while stalking his ex-girlfriend, who lived across the street. He then stole the vehicle with the body still inside and continued to pursue the woman. Matthews pleaded no contest to second-degree murder in late 2023 and was sentenced to 20 to 80 years in prison, but the plea deal didn't sit well with Jekyll's daughter, who speculated that Matthews agreed to it because, as a habitual offender, he was already facing the potential of significant prison time for the stalking case. She said she didn't feel good about the plea deal and didn't feel justice was served for her father, but Kent County Prosecutor Chris Becker maintained that the investigation had been carried out properly and that the findings show that Matthews was the killer. Number 3. Anthony Flanagan. After getting into a fight with his family in September of 2024, an Ann Arbor, Michigan man got completely undressed and broke into a stranger's Washtenaw County home in the middle of the night. He attacked an elderly couple in their 80s and their dog, then fled the scene and went to a neighbor's house where police found him banging on the door. The elderly victims were rushed to the hospital where an 81-year-old female died from her injuries, and their dog survived after undergoing surgery for his wounds. Police said that the couple did not know the suspect, 40-year-old Anthony Flanagan, who remains held without bond at the Washtenaw County Jail. Flanagan is charged with open murder, assault with intent to murder, first-degree home invasion, assault with intent to do great bodily harm by strangulation, assault and battery, and animal cruelty. Questions over his mental health have led to several delays in the case while the defendant undergoes court-ordered testing and treatment. In February of this year, Flanagan was deemed incompetent but restorable. 3 months later, the judge overseeing the case ruled that he was competent to stand trial. According to an update from June, Flanagan will now undergo testing to determine if he was sane at the time of the deadly attack. Number 2. Kevin Powell. 28-year-old Casey Ray Nutter was reported missing in Fort Worth, Texas in April of 2016 after being last heard from more than 4 months earlier. At the time of her disappearance, she was living with her boyfriend, 50-year-old Kevin Powell, who had been arrested the previous month for almost killing Nutter during a domestic dispute. A relative of Powell's told police that he had confessed to killing Nutter, then chopping her body up into small pieces with power saws and dissolving it with chemicals. Investigators searched the home and found evidence that corroborated the family member's claims. They also discovered that Powell had repainted a bedroom and sold his power saws, and while Nutter's body was never found, prosecutors felt they had a strong enough case to pursue a capital murder charge against Powell. During the trial, which took place in the spring of 2019, the defense argued that Nutter could still be alive while highlighting her struggles with addiction and mental illness as possible factors in her disappearance. After deliberating for just over an hour, however, the jury found Powell guilty, resulting in an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 1. The murder of Timothy Hyatt. In a bizarre series of events that began on a Saturday during the spring of 2024, police in Akron, Ohio, responded to a 911 call about a 44-year-old man who had been shot during a kidnapping the previous night. Officers arrived to find him panicking and bleeding from a head wound. The man claimed that 2 unnamed captors had forced him into a car at knife point following a dispute at a bar, and that he had escaped following a struggle inside the vehicle. He admitted to running someone over during the incident, and there was a car parked in the driveway with a smashed window. Later that day, police responded to a 911 call in Wayne County where they found one of the alleged kidnappers, 27-year-old Timothy Hyatt, dead along a roadside with a gunshot wound to the head. The second suspect survived after being shot in the elbow but refused to cooperate with law enforcement when questioned about the incident. Investigators determined that the 3 men were riding in a car together when a fight broke out and that the 2 kidnapping suspects were shot during the altercation, but they weren't sure what exactly had happened or who was culpable, leaving them unable to file charges against either of the surviving parties. Authorities urged anyone with information to contact them, but the case appears to remain unsolved. Thanks for watching. Tell us the most unbelievable criminal story you've ever heard. Drop it in the comments and maybe we'll uncover it in a future video.